Greetings, hello. My name is Michael Timmons. I am the author of the Lycan War Saga and the Shards of the Coven series. I am also the organizer for the Writer's Block Author Fair, which is held here in Toledo on October 22nd. And it's going to be a great time if you are an author and would love to participate. I'm going to put a link down below so that you can register and be one of the authors to come. It's held at the Franklin Park Mall in the food court, so you have a lot of traffic that's right there already at the mall, and we get a lot of people coming through. We'll have authors from all different types of genres, from mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, children's books. We'll also have some memoirs, poetry, self-help, just a huge variety of authors that will be there. It's going to be a great time. And like I said, if you want to come, I would love to have you. And also, welcome again to my channel. If you are enjoying the content that I'm providing for you, please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so you can be notified at any time I do a new video. The types of videos I do on here is I would like to speak to you about writing, being an author, my books, and I also have been doing a review, a spoiler review of the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime. I know I'm a little bit, late to the Paul game, but I didn't have a YouTube channel at that time when it came out. So I'm kind of backtracking, getting all caught up, getting through all the episodes, so that when Season 2 comes out in 2023, I will be ready to review them then. So, today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process I went through to write my first book, The Awakening, which is book 1 of the Lycan War Saga. Now, this book and its companion book, because this is part 1 of The Awakening, there's part 2 of The Awakening as well, took me about 10 years to write. Now, it was kind of 10 years off and on, mainly off, because basically, as I was writing, I had, I worked full time. Was married, had kids, and, I didn't really put a whole lot of time in it because, quite honestly, the idea of sending out query letter after query letter after query letter to agents or publishers to see if they would be interested in repping me or seeing if they would be interested in my book, and going, waiting and waiting and waiting to get replies back and finding out that they're going to say no, which most of the time that's what happens. You'll get hundreds of no's before you get one yes, so they say. Although, who knows, you might get lucky and get struck by lightning and get a yes right away. But chances are, you're not. So the idea of doing that just really did not make it interesting to me to finish my book. I was like, I can finish my book, but then what? I'm going to waste all this time trying to find somebody who might actually even look at my book before they decide to pass on it. Most of the time, it just ends in a slush pile, and the chances are nobody's even going to look at it. So it just didn't interest me. So I picked at it for many years, but until I finally found out that Amazon had self-publishing. And when I learned that and realized that I could just upload my book and get a cover for it and publish it, I was like, crap, I really want to finish this book now. So that's what I did. So I would say the bulk of my writing occurred within the last 2 years of my 10-year stint writing this book. And once I finished writing it, I did a lot of research. I started getting online and checking to see, find editors, and I also wanted to find a good cover artist, because for me, as a fantasy writer, I have always been drawn to beautifully depicted covers. One of my favorite artists, Keith Parkinson, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he did the covers for the Shannara series. He did the cover, well, the second Shannara series, and maybe the follow-up series. He did that. He also did the Deathgate cycle covers. Trying to think of some of the other covers I did, but he just had this beautifully amazing cover art that I just loved, and I wanted to make sure that I had a cover that when people saw it, that they would be like, wow, that is awesome. So I had a real hard time finding a cover artist. Obviously, I didn't have a whole lot of money like many of you to spend on cover art. I know that there's a lot of cover art out there that's already, pre-designed. I can't think, for some reason I can't think of the word. It's lost in my head here. But basically, you can just go through a bunch of images and say, okay, I like this cover. Now put my title on it and make it the cover for my book. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to find something that represented the story of my book. So I searched and searched and searched. I found a great cover artist out of Romania online, and she worked with me. She was really helpful in helping me at the beginning. She was also just starting out, so we kind of learned together, which was kind of nice. And in the end, we came up with this cover art, and this is how I wanted to do it, because what I wanted to depict is this right here is one of the main characters. She's Sylvanas. She's a druidess, and she, in Ancient Celt, she goes against her rival, Kestrel, who believes that civilization needs to be destroyed, that it's harmful to nature and should be destroyed. Sylvanas believes that nature and civilization can coexist with help. That basically, if they guide humanity, they'll be able to keep civilization from damaging nature, and that's her belief. So they go to war, and when they go to war, they create were creatures, lycanthropes, to fight that war. Now, as we start the book, Kestrel has essentially been defeated. And Sylvanas has defeated her, but Kestrel manages to create a spell that will keep her in stasis until some point in the future. So, Sylvanas, finding this out, she casts another spell that she'll be reawoken in her time. And whenever Kestrel's spell activates, that'll reawaken Sylvanas' basically soul, and her soul will, come into existence in our time. So that's why I wanted to pick this, because initially we start off at Stonehenge. That's where the first opening scene takes place, but then we end up in our time. So, I wanted to make it half and half, and of course have the moon here to symbolize the lycanthropy, the were creatures. I am getting this redone this year. That's my goal. So that to kind of, and not as much as I love this cover, because I truly do love this cover, I'm going to redo this because it's not really symbolic of the tone of the book, because this looks kind of peaceful, and frankly, there's a lot of violence in this book, and this doesn't have any were creatures on it, and the book is full of were creatures. So I've chosen to redo that. But anyways, so that was a difficult part, was finding an artist, and I stayed with her for the next 3 books, even though unfortunately our relationship kind of soured. I didn't I worked with her because I didn't want to go through the problem of having to find another artist, because finding one that's going to work for me in the way I wanted them to work for me, I knew was difficult, and I had books coming out, and I wanted to make sure I had an art, having cover art ready, because these things take time, and people get, they get these artists, a lot of them, they get schedules, and they schedule out maybe 1-2 years, and then have to put everything off because they can't get done in time to get your art done. So, and I didn't want to risk that, so I kind of stuck with her a lot longer than I feel like I wanted to or should have. And that's the problem that you might have. You might work with an artist, and it may not work out for you, or they may become really popular and raise their prices to a point where they're no longer affordable for you, and you'll have to find somebody new, and that's difficult. Now, the next step I had was an editor. I went with somebody I kind of knew, and he had reviews. They said he did a great job. And the problem with editing is, for an author, is obviously you're writing, and you're writing to the best of your ability with the grammar that you know and what you think is right. And then you give it to somebody else, and you pay them, and you say, here, find all the mistakes that I made and fix them. Show me what I did wrong. Look for the passive voice and correct, show me how I should write it better, or look for all the errors, all the writing errors, all the grammar errors, and that I couldn't find, because honestly, I went through this book probably 10 times looking for errors and how to rewrite sentences, and just looking for common mistakes, or how I might write something a certain way, or duplicate, and I might say the same thing over and over again. I looked for all that, and I paid somebody. I paid him, gave him good money, had him edit it. Now, in the editing process, he told me, he said, and I'm not saying I disagree with him on this, but he said, for this one, because this is basically, I had a larger book, and he said I would break this into 2 books, and one, because you can make more money, because you'll have 2 books that you're selling, which isn't wrong. That's good advice. And 2, because a lot of this book is, and because it's called The Awakening, is a lot of this book is these people, each of these people that are in the book, as they come into their powers of their lycanthropy, it basically shows you how it affects each one of these people's lives. So there's quite a few, and they get introduced separately, and I introduce them. They find out that they can shift into these creatures, and you see how that affects them. And we do that several times. So in a way, it's a little bit repetitive, but you get good guys and you get bad guys, and so and there's different people who are different ages, and there's men and there's women, and each of them have their own story, and I wanted to basically give time for that. So like I said, it's a little bit kind of repetitive, because you have, like I said, I introduce you to a character. They have their moment where they shift, and then you find out how that affects their lives, and then also you find out that they also find out that there are others like them. So he suggested I separate it into 2. My problem with this, and obviously I'm not saying discount the advice of your editor, but for me, this book, The Awakening, the reason why I called it The Awakening is because each of these characters go through their own awakening into their powers, and that happens in both books. So that's why I wanted to call it The Awakening. I couldn't really name the second book something different, because the theme was the same. I mean, I could have, but I don't even know what I would do. So basically what I did is I made it The Awakening Part 1, Part 2. Now that's caused me lots of problems. It's really hard to explain to people when they see it. Yeah, when I'm at book fairs or whatever, I really always have to say, okay, this is Part 1, this is Part 2 of Book 1, and this is Book 2. So it's a little bit confusing, and I get that. And also online, when I'm selling it online, I see a lot of people who buy this book, and then they buy Book 2. I'm not sure if they're the same people, but I'll see purchases for Book 1, Part 1, and then I'll see, within like a week or week and a half, then somebody buys Book 2, and they're not buying Part 2. And so there might be a lot of people out there who are confused. Even though I have it as a series on Amazon, as Part 1, Part 2, Book 2, it's still, I think it confuses some people. So, as I redo the cover for this one, I am also going to I'm going to combine them, put them together, I'll have to make some adjustments, obviously, and how I do that, but that's my goal. So that was my next big hurdle, was the editing process. Like I said, I paid him good money. He went through it, found, a lot of errors, and I fixed those errors. Now, like I said, when you are using an editor, your main problem is that you're giving them the book, and you're hoping that they're going to find the mistakes, because obviously they're mistakes that you couldn't find. But here's the catch. If they don't find them, you'll never know, because obviously you couldn't find them in the first place. So for you, they're a mystery. And so when they edit it and they give it back to you, and you're thinking, okay, good, it's edited, it's all done now, and now I can release it. So obviously what I did, I had it published, I sent it into Amazon, got it all published, and 3 or 4 reviews down the line, needs a publisher, bad editing. And I'm like, but like, this obviously wasn't edited. I'm like, I edited it, and I paid for an editor. What else do you want from me? So I even went back to him and said, hey, look, I'm getting complaints, and I realize there's grammar Nazis out there who complain about the slightest thing. I get that, but I was getting, it wasn't like one person here and there. It was, every 3rd or 4th review, somebody would mention, it was like, hey, great book, I love it, it's really nice, but it could use some editing. I mean, a lot of them weren't like huge, like, complaints. They still enjoyed the book, they still enjoyed reading it, but they were like, hey, there were some issues. There should be some editing, more editing needs to be done. So I'm like, I'm getting these complaints. So I gave it back to him. He edited it again. There was some more stuff that he fixed. I put it back out there. Still people finding editing issues. I even paid, finally, a 3rd person to go through it again. I kind of reworked this book a little bit too, because I had a lot of POV changes. That was one of my another complaint that I had, that I jumped from POV a lot, and it was a little jarring. So I cleaned all that up, made it a little less, head jumping, and I released it. So I haven't had too many complaints since then. Obviously, every once in a while I'll get one, but for the most part, I think it's really done. Now, I just got Pro Writing Tool, which is a really great program that I've been using. I highly recommend it. One thing I will say, though, is that when you're uploading uploading your book into the program, do it in chunks, because the program has an auto-saving tool. It saves it quite often, and if you have a lot to save, then there's a huge pause while it's auto-saving. So you sit there and you're like, okay, it's saving, and then you type like a few things and fix a few things, and then it's saving, because it's auto-saves a lot, and there's a lot of pause. I know I'm kind of jumping around here. I apologize, but so after my editing fiasco, I guess, or confusion, I don't know. These are just still things that I came across as I did it. Finally got it done. Got it out there. Released part 1, part 2. I released this one in February, 5 years ago, and then I released part 2 in October. So it was kind of like back-to-back release. It was kind of nice to do it that way, to have them that close. But there's lots of things I've learned since then. I didn't have beta readers, so I've been starting to employ a lot more beta readers for my books. Of course, what's nice is that, these are people that have already read part 1 and part 2 and book 2, so they're already familiar with the material and they're eager to read it. So it's helpful to get them to go through it. I have a new editor who does a much better job. But like I said, I just got Pro Writing Tool, which, I think I want to say it was $79. It wasn't that expensive for a year subscription, I believe it was. So, which, isn't bad at all for what it helps. And I've been going through my current book, which is the second book of the Shards of the Coven series. Right now, I've been kind of picking away at it, so it's really helpful. It has a lot of positive things about it. My biggest problem is unfortunately I uploaded the whole manuscript, and so it auto saves a lot, and I have to pause after each thing, and I don't want to cut it up because I've already done some. So I think it would just be too much difficulty to figure out where I've edited and send. It's confusing, I know. So, anyways, so a little bit about this book. As I explained, we have two Judases from ancient Celt who go to war over the fate of civilization, and they have were creatures that they create to fight that war. And now we jump ahead to our time, which is a non really tell you what time it is, just basically present day. It's always helpful so that you don't date yourself. Although obviously there's stuff in the book that will be more noticeable as being in the 2000s or 2010s or whatever you want to call it, or 2020s now. So I mean, you always are going to date yourself because you write to your times. But so we get introduced to a few characters. We get introduced to Clint, who is our, well, I don't want us to ruin it, but we get introduced to Clint, Kat, Hank, Shay, oh my gosh, I've already forgotten who we get introduced to. Blaine. So Shay, Blaine, Clint, and Kat, and Hank, and also Samuel. We get introduced to, and we also get introduced to Stephanie. So there are also some side characters we get introduced to as well, which is pretty cool. That obviously play an important part. And then in book part 2, which is here somewhere. Let me see if I have a copy of that here. I do not. I don't have a copy right here. So, part 2, you get introduced to the rest of the crew. And basically each of those individuals, as I said before, they go through their transformation, and we have several instances where they kind of run into each other and get introduced to each other. As I said, there's good guys, there's bad guys. There is a lot of descriptive violence in it. There are some sexual situations. There are some trigger points, like there is an attempted rape, and There is also abuse that happens. None of it, some of it's descriptive, some of it's not, but yeah, that's, but basically book one is your introduction to the characters, which I just recently was going over some of the fantasy tropes, and one of the tropes that is very common in fantasy, which I thought was interesting because in fantasy tropes like, you know, Lord of the Rings, Shannara, a lot of them, or even Wheel of Time, is, you know, you have these group of people that are together, and about 1/3 of the way through, they usually end up getting separated into different groups, and each kind of, you know, go on their off in their own direction, and then they come together somewhere near the end to accomplish their goal. And I was like, when I read that, I started thinking, I'm like, wow, that's right. That happens in so many books, and I did almost the complete opposite. I started with everybody separate, and then I brought them together. So, and I realized that this has a lot to do with the time that I have grown up in, and the media that I watch. And a lot of the media that I watch, for the most part, a lot of the big stuff that I watch is superhero stuff, Marvel stuff. So in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even the DC Cinematic Universe, you tend to have origin stories, and then you put them into a supergroup. And that's essentially what I did. I started out with origin stories and put them into a supergroup. But in my case, I had origin stories for your bad people, and I had origin stories for your good side, and then I'm bringing them together, because book two is called The Gathering. So basically, book two is both sides gathering their groups together so that they can then basically go to war together, hence the Lycan War Saga. So, that is a little bit about the Lycan War Saga, some of the difficulties I went through to produce to get the book published, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. And if you're interested in the book and the series, I'm going to put a link down below so that you can click on it and read it. Tell me what you think about it. I would really like to know if you enjoy it or if you don't enjoy it. Either way, that's fine. Just put a comment down below and let me know. And as always, please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell to get notified for any further videos as I do them. And have a wonderful night.